I don't like that people who don't, even people in our faith, think that it's the way we've always been is racist. Like, we're black. We were past everybody else with inclusion. Like, we were doing things that were getting Mormons killed. The question was, well, where did it come from? And is this from Joseph from the beginning, or?
Like, look at him. He looks silly.
He does look like Karl Marx.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
I've never seen Zebedee Coltrane and Karl Marx in the same room at the same time. Have you? What's he gonna do about it, huh?
He's probably repented.
Yell at me from the terrestrial kingdom? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Because I found something weird that I've wondered about.
Even though the source of this ban was not necessarily inspired, it would come from a place of fear and racism, you think that the Lord can still work through something like that?
Well, I mean, look at the Book of Mormon. It says that God will consecrate your afflictions. Okay, I had a question that I'm curious about. In the course of your studies, where are your thoughts on where the priesthood ban came from?
Here's the problem.
Oh, wait.
You probably know.
Can we do a video on this? Because that's an argument, and I want to set the story.
Do you want to?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm fine to do it, but it's a doozy.
No, let's do it, though, because, like, I actually think the doozy's necessary, and it indicts in a way that I think is... You know what I'm saying? But tell me...
And maybe we'll see if we're on the same page, or even. You want to see...
Because that was one of the number one things I studied.
Okay.
Because maybe while we're talking about it, we just go through it. Because I found something weird that I've wondered about. So okay.
I mean, we're probably going to have different opinions on it, so...
Well, actually, no. I'm
and different opinions isn't
Well,
bad.
I'm saying based on what I don't know. Would you just go for it?
Yeah, let's do it. Why would you say I have different points? You call me racist, dog?
No,
I'm totally just kidding.
I should grab Kwaku for this.
Welcome back to Midnight Mormons, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Cardinellis, and today we are again joined in the studio with Kwaku L. Barad Whitback. Whitback, that was horrible.
That was the worst.
Yeah, that was really bad. Whitback, Leo Winiger, and our good buddy Mauli Bonner, who just released a cool movie that we just talked about in the last episode. But we had a little bit of a pre-show here where we are asking, what are we asking? Where the priesthood ban came from. Because Mauli's done some serious historical inquiry. So has Kwaku. So has myself. And we're just going to do a little powwow here and see what we came up with. Mauli, you go first.
Ooh, wow. Yeah. So when I was researching Elijah Abel, wanting to tell his story, him being one of the early priesthood holders in the church, I realized that I feel like there's a few bombshells in the history that aren't talked about. That now I'm getting a little bit nervous as I'm preparing to tell the story and make the movie.
Yeah. Okay.
We know that Joseph Smith and Elijah Abel were close, had a relationship, and Joseph Smith wanted Elijah Abel to have the priesthood, and he told Zebedee Coltrane, okay, let's make this happen. Zebedee Coltrane didn't really want to do it, but did it, and did the washing and anointings, and confirmed by Joseph Smith's dad, Joseph Smith Sr. And years later, this is after Joseph's dead, the question was, well, where did it come from? And is this from Joseph from the beginning, or are black people supposed to have the priesthood, whatever else? And we have Abe Smoot and Zebedee Coltrane, who was there, said that it came from Joseph Smith, that black people were not supposed to have the priesthood. Which is
and actually, dude, as you're talking about this, I looked at that record relatively recently, and one thing that I thought was really interesting was the way that Zebedee Coltrane talked about it. He was talking about how Joseph Smith was saying we shouldn't baptize slaves, and so because of that probably means we shouldn't give the priesthood to black people, right? And so it looked like he was conflating the one time that Joseph Smith was saying, hey, we shouldn't baptize slaves, kind of saying that like we shouldn't do that when they haven't been like released from their as from being property of somebody else yet, right? Like we should be careful around that. Like he took that and then put that on top. And I didn't know that he was there for Elijah Abel's confirmation though.
Yeah, that's the part that's tricky to me.
Yeah.
Is that he was there so he could give a lot of clarity to it. But he didn't.
Dude.
And I think because people knew that he was so close with Joseph, that it was like, okay, well, he said and he knew Joseph, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you think this guy had malintent? That he was... So you think we got to lay this at the feet of this guy? Because I'm all about, scapegoats. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm totally down with that. Is Zebedee Coltrane the scapegoat now?
He's a big one. Back then there were so many missteps. There's so many missteps during that period of history in America, period. When it comes to black people and American history.
Yeah.
But he takes a big piece of the cake.
I don't like the fact that this guy looks like Karl Marx.
No.
Oh, look at him. I put up a picture. He looks like Karl Marx.
Actually, it's kind of true. There's a little bit of those big, not mutton chops. What do they call that? When you
I'll make fun of him. I don't care. He ruined Black Mormon history for 100 years. I don't care. I'll make fun of him.
Might have been 100. It was more than 100.
What's he going to do about it, huh?
He's probably repented
Yell at me
by
from
now.
the terrestrial kingdom? I'm kidding. I'm what?
May he be struck down by a lightning bolt.
But I think that's so interesting to see that that's like, they're trying to understand and contextualize things. So they asked someone close to Joseph about it, and then he didn't talk about that moment. That's so...
And then that moment is not really talked about again. So it wasn't until way later.
So you think that's where it all originated? Was just from that moment in which, because Joseph...
Not originated, no, but that's what solidified it. So we know when it was taken away. We know like Brigham Young, 1852, kind of really made it official. When Utah became slave territory, it kind of all happened around that same time. But
okay, so what you've come up with is you really feel Zebedee Coltrane, in what some being more giving the benefit of the doubt might say was a misinterpretation of Joseph Smith during his presidential political platform when trying to clarify what his vision for slavery was in a time of civil war, saying like, okay, no, I don't think we should be causing problems, states' rights. He modified his presidential platform to say like, we should give freemen, as they were called back then, their own territory, which is actually a very liberal view at the time. But he did clarify that many southern states were worried if you could escape to northern states, would you recognize their status as property, or would you give them freeman status, which is what led up to the Civil War? And Joseph Smith said, okay, look, we're not trying to become a sanctuary state, shall we say, for escaped slaves. And you think that Zebedee Coltrane trying to take that political statement is the basis that the religious priesthood was taken away, even though Joseph Smith was actively giving it. So you think the linchpin is, and the bottleneck is through Zebedee Coltrane.
Zebedee Coltrane and Abe Smoot. Yeah.
Okay.
Dang.
So
well, I would also say though, you can clearly see how Joseph Smith evolved on the position of slavery by just looking at the quotes throughout his life and how they changed as he got older. Because I'm not even sure that, his presidential campaign included buying a bunch of land, buying all the slaves from the southern slave owners, and then giving black people their own area to just be industrious and build, kind of like how he wanted to do with the Latter-day Saints, right? So, but early on, you don't really find that. Early on, he just has very small references to, he's from Palmyra, New York. There's not a lot of black people there in general when he's there. And the first time he starts discovering this is when he's leaving New York, going into other states, leading the church. And then there's black people coming around. And he's like, oh, okay, well, now what do I do? And I think he seemed to understand that what was written in the scriptures about like skin curses was not how anti-Mormons view it, because you don't find Joseph Smith using the Book of Mormon or Book of Abraham to justify any sort of discrimination, which would assume that the anti-Mormon cynical interpretation of those scriptures is not accurate, and the biblical one, like Solomon being black but comely and skin being another word for light, or same word in Hebrew, is more of a countenance type description, which would make a lot of
Well,
sense.
it's true. It wasn't until we didn't start having this whole, neo curse of Cain doctrine introduced into the Mormon zeitgeist, shall we say, until we were trying to fit that square peg into a circular hole and justify it.
We got it from the Southern Baptists.
Yeah, that was a Southern Baptist thing that Sidney Rigdon brought back from the South.
Can I also say...
and during the time of William McCary, right? When he's trying to figure out how to handle that situation.
But also, can we say... why do we get called the racist church over and over and over again for misinterpreted verses? And the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, their denomination came specifically because they didn't want to get rid of slaves. They were literally like, we are the Baptists that like holding and and nobody says they're the racist church.
Yeah, people don't realize the split between the First and the Second Baptist Church was like literally over the issue of whether or not black people should get the priesthood.
And no one criticizes them, but we get it criticized. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And our guy just tried to abolish slavery, and we're the bad ones. And these guys were like, exact opposite. We want to keep them. Come worship with us.
Oh, okay, so
it's crazy.
But who's criticizing us is the former believers, right? The former members of our church, primarily who call us racist.
I don't know. I'm from the South. A lot of those Southern evangelicals say the exact same thing.
They do the same thing. Okay.
When
an easy
when I was a kid and Obama was running for president, so many of the pastors in my hometown were like, "Do not vote for that Muslim man trying to become president." And then when Romney was running against him, they were saying,
they're racist.
We're okay with you voting for that Muslim man as long as you better not damn vote for that Mormon, though. That's where I do draw the line. It's like, wow, this is really something. You guys don't like blacks, but you hate Mormons more. So I'm their prime target. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so Kwaku thinks it's the influence of Southern Baptist congregations on Sidney Rigdon, bringing back
either Rigdon or Pratt. I'm not sure which one.
Pratt was involved too.
Yeah. Okay. So after their mission in the southern states, you think the Curse of Cain doctrine was brought back by the influence of other American denominations, brought back to Utah at a vulnerable time when it was called. Okay.
Honestly, there's another weird factor here that I learned about relatively recently, which is there was a scientific theory put forward at the time that the children of interracial couples would not be able to continue procreating, that they would end up
the mules.
Yeah,
so the term mulatto comes from.
Exactly. They were talking about how that will end the human race through interbreeding of races, will make people who can't have more children, which is just sounds insane now, but this was legitimately a scientific theory that they had at the time. So when we have people saying they should listen to the science, I'm like, should they though?
Yeah,
I don't know.
You're referencing Blumenbach. Did you ever come across Blumenbach in your studies, Mauli?
No.
Oh, yeah. In the late 18th century, just about 40 or 50 years before Joseph Smith, there was a doctor named Blumenbach who invented the theory of races, that there's different races.
Oh, okay, yes.
To this day, we've kind of adopted the language of our oppressors, our scientific ones, Brad, by even accepting the premise that there's different races instead of just one human race. And he's the one that started with those scientific theories that actually conveniently, those from the UK and North America are just a little bit better because they're all my friends, and
exactly.
Well, and those barbarians in Italy, what do you know?
And so I think that was an influence, because you see things said by Brigham Young where it seems like he ends up worried about the children of interracial couples, specifically the children, because he starts off not so worried that there's interracial marriage. But then when he starts, I think it's probably some of the influence of this scientific thinking that he's buying into.
And it's also interesting because he was also the guy who said that there are Quakers on the moon because of the Great Moon Hoax, where the scientists were screwing with the world, saying that they found the Quakers on the moon through their
telescopes.
Yeah, through the telescope. And so Brigham Young read the news. He was not he read the news, and he reported things to people that he was like, wow, the newest studies show this, and this. And so we see that in Brigham Young's, whereas Joseph Smith hated the news, which is why he, burned down that one thing. But Brigham Young, he was always quoting the news. But what I find is interesting is my mom taught me this as a little kid, how if you look up when we started using white and black to describe Europeans and Africans, it was not that long ago. That's when we started. That was not an accepted nomenclature ever. So, for example, even if you go to Korea today, Koreans call themselves white people. A lot of parts of Asia, they refer to themselves as white people. And
even in California, LA Unified School District questionnaires, they ask, are you white or white dash Hispanic or white dash non-Hispanic? And it's like,
yeah. And then because they can differentiate themselves from like Filipinos and such who are a little darker. And so they did not call Africans black people up until 300, 400 years ago of all of human history. And so when you want to start doing research on black people in Europe, you have to look up Moors. You know what I'm saying? Like it was, these are the Moors. They're completely different terms. So when you look at these scriptures, whether it's the Old Testament with Solomon or the dark skins of the Book of Mormon, you have to remember if these are ancient works, then you can't view skin in the 21st century light. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so Joseph Smith translating this, right, having people read it, people are not reading this at first thinking it's literally... They're not going, the Jews came over and turned to Indians and turned to Africans. That's 3 versions of transracialism in a book. That doesn't exist in the Book of Mormon. That's crazy. It's like, they went from Chief Sitting Feather to Zambuco. That doesn't make sense. It's not possible. That's not what the Book of Mormon is saying. But that's the characterization that the critics try to give it, but it doesn't work. And so when you realize that if Cardin's family moves to Ecuador, within 7 generations, they'll be brown.
What?
Like literally, that's how fake race is. And like, it really isn't that cool. It's always weird when people
I like to say within 7 weeks, I'd be brown.
Okay.
But hey.
Are you saying you be getting with Ecuadorian women or are you tanning? Because I can't tell you.
I would like to think that I have such an olive complexion from my Polish heritage. Right.
There it is.
Yeah, right.
But that's a real thing. For example, I was born, my hair was blonde when I was born.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it was super blonde. It was like this, but blonde. And then it turned red, and then it turned golden brown. Then it turned like this. It was like very, very dark brown black. You know why? Because I've got Dutch in me. There's some random Dutchmen that are in my gene pool.
They were trying to get out.
I don't think it was so random, bro. Because
the Dutch colonized Ghana.
great grandmother must be gorgeous.
Well,
and that Dutchman was like, oh, man.
Well, we all know my great-great-great-grandpa, what he did. He cussed that story, right? About how he...
I don't remember.
No.
But are you going to tell me something heinous?
I'm not sure my family wants me to talk about it, but I will. So, so they came over, they were enslaved, and there's a really big problem in America. I can't believe my mom's going to lose her mind when I tell this story. There's a big problem in America because other countries, when they had slave quarters, like in ancient Rome, they had part of the area of the city was where all the slaves lived. And in the same way you have like a car lot, you want to go get it repaired. You know that's your car, but it's in the area, right? Well, the problem with that throughout history is whenever you start getting too many slaves and you get really industrious, at some point you have a giant mob of people that one day one guy goes, and then they fight, and then there's rebellion, right? So America decided what we're going to do is we're going to have our houses, and our slave quarters will be in our backyards or next to our homes, and the slaves will be with us. Now, that sounds like it'd be a better idea, more advantageous for a slaveholder, but here's where it starts to get bad. Because your dad does it, and then you inherit it all, okay? And then you get married, and you're 27, you marry your 22-year-old wife, and then you know what? The slaves that your parents had, they're all old now. They can barely even work, so they're just chilling. What do? You know what? Let's go to the slave auctions. Let's get some younger 13, 12-year-old slaves, and then we'll raise them the way we want. But then they start having kids the same time as they're buying young slaves. So if you got 4 kids and you have 4 slaves and they all grow up the same age, well, what's going to happen when your son or daughter who's being set up with the fat rich guy across the street who's ugly and acne-filled and is spoiled and pompous because he grew up with all this slave money, or in the backyard, there's freaking jacked Mauli's great-great-grandpa with amazing abs who's doing nothing but day labor, and when the
emphasis on the abs,
right? And when the girl's like, whatever slave, John, can I have some lemonade? And he's like, of course, miss. And he brings you when they're polite and they're good looking and they're right there, sex was happening. So in my family line, that is what happened. My great grandpa, the slave owner's daughter.
Can we choose a different word?
Had sexual intercourse with the slave owner's daughter. Yeah. They had an affair, and they were so embarrassed they sent them to Canada because we can't have mulatto grandkids. So they sent them to Canada, and that was happening a lot because America had their slave system set up in the worst way possible, where you don't have good-looking, shirtless, hard workers walking around your backyard when they'll do anything you tell them to do, when you've got teenage girls who are horny. That's what happens. So that's like in Canada was getting so many mulatto people back then because that's what happened. So that's how my family got to freedom. They slept their way to the top.
No. Oh my God. Wow. Is that where you get your guns from, dog? Is that where you get those?
No, I wish.
You were talking about your great-great-grandfather's abs that were turned on the ladies as he was chopping
there were
that
no
wood.
overweight slaves. They were all in shape because they were constantly doing physical labor. And it just makes sense. And so America were the ones who were
so I want to sum this up.
Yeah,
so before we finish here,
Did you guys know that?
Well, I mean, mine is the opposite way around, where it's not so romantic.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
shoot. Oh, it was
Yeah. So
that did happen a lot as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I do know that that's where it all comes. I mean, a lot of black families have a white person in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
On
That's
the way
why
up.
so many Jeffersons.
Yeah.
So many black Jeffersons and stuff.
Yeah.
The Ancestry.com commercial.
Yeah. Well, that's why there's so many mixed people went to Canada back then. There's just a bunch of them because they're like, all right, send the daughter or son up there. Here's some money. Go. We can't embarrass our family name by having these mixed kids here, so they're all in Canada.
Okay, so Kwaku. So Mauli says he thinks it's Zebedee Coltrane. Mauli thinks that it's because of at best mistaken misinterpretation of something Zebedee Coltrane said. At worst, a purposeful misrepresentation of what Joseph Smith thought via Zebedee Coltrane. But he says Zebedee Coltrane.
I do.
Kwaku, I like it. That was very, I do. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Mauli says Zebedee Coltrane. Kwaku says it was the racist South and the Southern presupposition of the curse of Cain.
Well, both.
Okay. Well, yeah, and both. Okay. Yeah. And Brad blames science, which I'm down with.
Oh my god!
Because science has just been completely corrupted by bad politics and bad reasoning, and
but honestly, I only think that's
the
like
market.
A secondary influence, right? I think Mauli's totally right about this Zebedee Coltrane thing because, from my studies of this as well, to me it kind of comes back to his testimony because they were asking and saying like, what did the prophet tell you? What did Joseph tell you? And then
he said it was Joseph Smith.
Okay,
yeah.
So well then,
he's the only one that says that Joseph Smith was the reason for this priesthood ban, right? Everywhere else it comes after, it's from a later date.
Okay, so in any of your research, did you come across the name William McCary?
Yeah.
Okay, what are your thoughts on whether or not it was William McCary or not?
Okay, so I don't think it was William McCary just because of Brigham Young's response there. So William McCary, we know that he was a black member of the church and he was, this is in 1847. Yeah. And he was bothered that he was being treated. He felt like I'm being treated unfairly because of the color of my skin. Mm-hmm. Brigham Young is like, no, it's actually not that because one of the best priesthood holders we have is an African, Q. Walker Lewis.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's where Brigham Young's mind was then. So it wasn't William McCary in my mind, but to your point, Kwaku, there's a man named, I can't remember his first name, but Brother Appleby went on a mission. And
is that why the food there is so tasty?
Exactly.
Or bad?
I think it's William Appleby.
The context of the story is going to make that really weird or really creepy.
Oh, really? Did I just say something totally bogus?
No, but basically, he came back after doing an incredible job, serving a mission. He just did so much, but he had a real issue with what he saw. Was this race mixing, and he came back and then there was a meeting at winter quarters with the apostles, President Young, and we don't have documents of that 13-hour meeting except for a few little paragraphs where it talks about how he felt about the race mixing. And it was, so from then on, that's when Brigham Young's whole tune changed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because Wikipedia. So we already know what you have thought from your research. Okay. We already know Brad's anti-science, and and Kwaku's anti-South. But
that's way more comfortable than mine.
This is what Wikipedia says, which Wikipedia never lies, as we know. You can look up, but Warner William McCary was an African-American convert to Mormonism who was excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1847 for claiming to be a prophet. Some researchers have suggested that McCary's action led to the church's subsequent policy of not allowing people of Black African descent to hold the priesthood or participate in temple ordinances at all. But you think that's a no-go. You think that's bad. That's a bad summary?
Based on Brigham Young's response to William, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. So,
you know what I think?
That's a wholesale indictment of Wikipedia. You heard it here first. Mauli Bonner does not support Wikipedia. I'm just totally kidding.
You guys know who Patrice O'Neal is, the old comedian?
Yeah.
Okay. He has this joke I remember from when I was a kid and it was playing on the TV where he said, in the same way when you think of the Holocaust, you think of Adolf Hitler. Black people just need one dude to blame it all on. And he's like, if there's just one white guy with a funny mustache and a big bike who invented slavery, we would solve all prejudice because we could be like, yeah, that's the guy. We hate him. We need one dude. We can just be like, that's the Priesthood Ban guy. We hate him. And I even vote to make it Zebedee Coltrane.
Well,
I vote to make all of our stuff anti-him.
No, you know what?
How do you have look at him. He looks silly.
He does look like Karl Marx.
His beady
Exactly.
eyes.
You know what I'm saying? He
I've never
like
seen
Karl Marx.
Zebedee Coltrane and Karl Marx in the same room at the same time. Have you?
All right. That's funny. So wow, this, okay, then this is my last question on this subject.
One thing to say though, it's not as though Zebedee Coltrane being the one that gets this blame for like having had the opportunity to say it wasn't from Joseph suddenly absolves everyone else for going along with it, right?
No, I'd love to historically think that it does and convince myself.
We're gonna make him this guy is the bad guy. We're gonna make him.
Okay, so
simplify it to that. Yeah,
this is a serious question though, because for example, we had this long discussion with Jim Bennett, and there was a lot of frustration in the blog vernacular, shall we say, during the whole recent debacle that you had with Brad Wilcox, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of criticism levied from the ex-Mormon side against us and our show and others, where they said, oh, the church lies in the Blacks in the Priesthood Gospel Topics essay, when they say that there's no clear evidence of where this came from. And I think even just from this conversation here, see, when I was working with Marvin Perkins and the Blacks in the Scriptures, he was pretty convinced at that time through a lot of research that was actually done by, unfortunately, some scholars that have gone inactive now, that he thought it was a case of interracial marriage where Brigham Young had been, even when he was prophet, he had trusted Joseph Smith and been so loyal to Joseph Smith that even though he had a personal disagreement with Blacks and the priesthood and so on and so forth, he said, I trust so much Brother Joseph that we're keeping this priesthood thing and the doctrine that Brother Joseph had intact until there was that one case of interracial marriage with somebody that he knew and he had a personal beef with him, and that resulted in being a public prohibition, right? So he was convinced that with Brigham Young, a personal beef became a public prohibition. You notice in your studies, you think it's the Zebedee Coltrane. Brad thinks it could possibly be Zebedee Coltrane as well, mixed with a lot of really bad science that was very popular at the time, like most science is bad at the time when we figure it out later. Similar to but anyway, and Kwaku says,
wait, are you saying this would be the No, I can't make the joke. I can't.
Yes, you can. You have to.
The second time in church history, bad science has influenced the prophet. Is that what you're saying?
Oh my God.
Is that what you're saying, huh?
Mauli just smiles and looks to the side because he's like,
I can't go along with this.
I'm not going along with this. No. So, but anyway, even in this conversation here, all of us have studied this at length and come up with slightly different answers. Do you think it is fair to say that there is no real clear indication of where this came from? Do you think that's fair?
Well, here's the issue with that. I think, and this is something Mormons are very good at. We're good at talking things into oblivion where it's nothing. You ever been in a ward council?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. At some point, we just have to. We know that there was clearly a meeting that happened where people's minds were changed. That was probably a big council where they debated and debated and debated. And if Brigham Young didn't want to do it, that's when he lost, okay? And everyone else won, and that's when it started. And it was probably due to, obviously, beliefs of anti-miscegenation, which was how people were during that time. But also, you got to remember, Brigham Young wasn't purely anti-mixing because he told them go get some Native American wives. Remember that? He was like, you should not, but if they're natives, it's fine. So he wasn't completely anti-mixing. He agreed that with whatever brethren influenced him, that they shouldn't be mixing people of African descent. And where I think it gets even more bizarre, though, is the fact that he said that after all the other sons of Adam have the priesthood, then Negroes would receive it and more. Which is the quote that no one ever talks about, because that doesn't sound like a ban to me. It sounds like a postponement. So whatever happened in that meeting, or whatever he was receiving, whatever, he did not believe that black people would never hold the priesthood. Not even Brigham Young. So then that makes me question, you know what? Ignore all the historical whatevers, okay? Why? Because think about this. God does weird stuff. God does stuff we do not understand. He put giants in Genesis. There were giants walking around. That's weird, right? So weird things happen. We don't fully understand it.
He said giants, not Polish people, Garden.
we need to have a John the Revelator type approach to this subject and start asking questions of why perhaps God would want to hold people of African descent for the last days to hold the priesthood. Why? Because that's my thought. Because let me tell you something. There's one place in America, in the world, that has gone totally uninfected by wokeism. It's Africa. It's the only continent that's completely like they are so old school it scares me. Like it scares everybody. Like, you know what I'm saying? You like Dallin H. Oaks would go to Africa and be like, they're a bit conservative. Like that's literally how conservative they are. So did God want to have a group of people that were so uninfluenced by Western corporatism and social media egoism and everything we're seeing happening in our country? Did he want someone to say, look, these are like the people that when you're in war, you need to have some secret troops like hiding behind the barges. You know,
there's a little bit of truth to that because, for example,
it's interesting.
Like I remember with our industrialized food supply, you guys may not remember it, but there was a landmark case when I was a kid in which a peanut butter factory knew that it had E. coli in its peanut butter and it didn't stop production because technically there was no law saying that like food had to be sold, you know, clean enough for human consumption. You know, like, and they literally, a ton of people died from E. coli in that peanut butter. And it was the first class action lawsuit where a corporation was held liable for the cleanliness of its food. You know what I'm saying? And it was this big landmark case that happened. Look up peanut butter and E. coli 1990s. You might come up with some really weird pictures of poop, but you'll also probably come up with an article from the, you know, from the 1990s. But I remember it was wild thinking then that just one mistake in a factory could kill thousands of people. Like now, as we have amassed into fewer and fewer factories and fewer corporations and fewer people's hands, it used to be 10% of our society engaged in agriculture. Now less than 0.1% of our society is engaged in agriculture and the making of our food. And it's only getting more and more centralized and more concentrated. And when the Doctrine and Covenants talks about needing to take care of your body in the word of wisdom by having, you know, these words of wisdom for, you know, how you eat and you live your life and you treat it like a temple. You know, most of the Western world, if there were some kind of nefarious poisoning
in consequence of evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days, I've warned you and forewarned you by giving unto you this word of wisdom by way of revelation. That is what the Lord says.
Yeah. So I mean, us, like if Tyson decided to purposefully spike the chicken, you know what I'm saying? And if Coke, which owns every soda that we have, had some evil Dr. 007 doctor that decided to spike the soda in one day, there's not a single person that doesn't eat a chicken or a beef derivative next to a can of soda in one day. It would wipe out.
There's literally
90% of the population of the world except for one continent.
Yeah, Africa. Wow.
Coke's there too. Probably,
also think about this. All it takes is for there to be basically a global plague. One worker just has to stay behind after everyone else goes home to the factory and spike the food. One man could do that.
And African countries recovered from COVID so much faster because they didn't have that insane bureaucracy.
Because we have stronger genes. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, that was pretty good. Digimon Hansu, dog. Dog, that was pretty awesome.
Jaimin Hansu.
Jaimin.
Look,
Digimon?
you couldn't even get the
I said
joke to work.
Digimon.
Look at that.
We were talking about
it would have been a good
Digimon.
joke, and you.
That was so pathetic. That was funny. We were talking about Pokemon and Digimon yesterday.
Digimon
And
Hansu. Jaimin, I choose you.
Jaimin, that was really bad. I was totally thinking the name in my head, and then I said Digimon.
Okay, so
Okay,
I've
cool.
got,
Let me
I've got a
ask-
serious follow-up question.
Well, let me
Go
ask a
ahead.
question. So, are you asking the question because you think, well, could it then be God who actually did direct the priesthood to be taken
Well,
away? Or
in some degree, he either directed it or was okay with it, right? Because he let it happen, right? He could have struck Brigham dead on the spot, right? But so the question is, do we believe that the Lord has a greater purpose for confusion, or do we just believe he's like, oh well, you messed up, now they have, that's just how it is? The whole story of the scriptures is him making things work out for the better always, right? Let's preserve this one baby in a basket because you think you're killing all these children, and that baby's going to grow up and he's going to destroy your Egyptian kingdom. Like, this is how it's always gone.
Yeah.
So my question is, okay, why did he want black people to be reserved for the last part of the last day to then be exposed to the gospel?
They're like the cavalry that always comes in the end of the movie to save the day, like the animals in Avatar.
That is, you guys think I'm kidding, but that's legitimately what I think. Because,
Oh, dang.
well,
No, I know. I was just giving an example.
again, Africa is cradle of civilization, but also so unaffected by so many
and then
of
the
the
last
source-
shall be first and the
Yeah,
first
last
shall
will
be
be-
last.
yeah,
Kind of
that's-
fits that too.
But even though the source of
Interesting.
this ban was not necessarily inspired, it was come from a place of fear and racism. You think that the Lord can still work through something like that?
Well, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
look at the Book of Mormon. It says that
But that's
God will
more-
consecrate your afflictions for your gain, right?
Oh,
So I think that's kind of a huge thing in the gospel.
Well,
is like
Cardin,
God will
remember-
turn
But I
stumbling
I
blocks
just
into
look at it
stepping
as I
stones.
think it is
Beauty
right
for
up here.
ashes, huh?
I
Yeah.
think it's right up there just with
Yeah.
Peter denying the Christ. It's just I think some people
and he
messed up.
becomes president of the church, even though he does that, right? I think that there has to be. How many times in Scripture is there just another tribe discovered that's just like magic, like, oh great, you're here? Like, these things constantly happen, and if there is one part of the world that is not only very pro-family, but pro-God, pro-religion, that probably has the Ark of the Covenant still in Ethiopia.
In Ethiopia,
We're talking
yeah.
about that. There's one part of the world, it would be Africa. And so, in my mind, I can see this. I can see whatever 19th century silly anti-miscegenation, oh, you're going to have a mule type kid if a redhead gets with a whatever silly things they were justifying it with. And City Hall, God said, fine, whatever answer you're going to come up with, we need a cavalry for the last day. We need someone in the back lines. We need someone behind the barge. Because you know what's going to happen? All my children in Asia, they're going to be taken over by communist countries and religion's going to be outlawed. My children in Europe, all the best blood's going to come here and they're all going to be secular atheists over there. My children in South America will be very, very devout, but they're going to have a lot of traditions of the great apostasy, and unfortunately that's going to lead to the same sort of colonialistic approaches with these gangs of taking over entire cities. But we're going to have just an area over here where they're so unaffected by the rest of this nonsense.
The
where
church is exploding there, man.
we're going to build them temples.
It's
And
awesome.
there's also, who cares about their ancestors more than anybody? People in Africa. I mean, literally, I think that God could use that, whatever that confusion is, for a greater purpose. And he's God. He's
So,
God.
think,
but he doesn't
you know-
inspire sin.
Right. So I think
No,
you're,
no,
I
no,
think
no.
Yeah,
you're
I was gonna
spot
say,
on. I
you
think
gotta
you're
be
spot on
clear.
with the second half of that, where, you know, what he can create from the worst things we can imagine. You know, but it doesn't mean that the worst things we can imagine
We're
because of-
instigated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
By God
my
or-
only pushback on this, by the way, it's fine.
Wait, who's God talking to? He says, you meant it for evil, but I meant it for good. I'm gonna.
No, I'm saying that's the ultimate making lemons out of lemonade, right? The only thing is, like, I always stand from a position I will never attribute to malice and conspiracy what can be attributed to incompetence, and there's far more scriptural precedent for prophets that were still supported by God despite wild incompetence than any kind of awesome
and
sinfulness.
But
than any kind of
any example you give, I can show how God uses that for a positive every single time.
No, but using a negative that God using a negative created by man through sin or incompetence has scriptural precedence in my mind.
Right.
God blatantly initiating a negative.
No, I'm not saying he initiated it. I'm saying he let it happen.
Well, he has to let it all happen.
Well, yeah, because it's our agency.
And also, this is straight up Garden of Eden, right? Okay, I know there has to be a knowledge of good and evil, but if I, God, tell you to go engage in the evil, then I'm directly responsible for evil. So I'm going to tell you not to, and you're going to choose the evil, thus allowing God to still be a God of goodness and allowing man to choose the evil for himself. It's the same thing. I'm not going to tell you to do this thing that's bad, but I know you're stupid enough and you're going to do it, but I'm going to make it work for good. Because this is still 5D chess between God and Satan. Like, we kind of forget that. This is still, and the Lord says, I know the end's from the beginning, and the beginning's from the end. So he sees the whole thing. And I just think we're so afraid of using the scriptural outlook on politically incorrect subjects because it's like, I don't want to seem like I'm racist. I don't want to seem. You're okay with the fact that God flooded the world and killed everybody. You're fine with that, but like,
oh, man.
He said one thing in the desert in 1848 that I just can't justify. Like, I'm sorry. If we're talking about the same God, he's going to make it make sense.
Okay, so before we end this podcast here, we're just
Molly,
gonna
what
put.
do you think?
We're gonna.
I can't tell if you're looking at me like you're admiring or I'm insane.
No. I think it's wonderful. I think it's fascinating, and I do think that we just have to make sure that we don't use God to alleviate our guilt and our history that we don't like. I just want to look back and see perfect prophets. I want that. But that's just not the case. They're human. Fine.
Well, and then the thing I was gonna
okay with those.
Amen.
Yeah.
The thing I was gonna ask is I noticed that I think. I think sometimes Kwaku might think, like, well, why do we ask about this and so on and so forth? I think the reason why we ask is because none of us would want to think that unwittingly, because of an over enthusiasm for a modern prophet, that we might follow a very negative thing such as a priesthood ban and then be guilty of somehow tangentially or even secondarily supporting that, right? So we want to know where it came from in order to avoid repeating it. Right. And part of the frustrating part about the priesthood ban is it seems like we can't quite nail down exactly where it came from.
This is also the arrogance of man.
No, I get that. I get that it's arrogant man, all that stuff.
No. What I'm saying is we think we're going to be the ones that can fix the problem that's been happening since Adam. We can't. We're going to mess up a lot. That's the whole, it's like sometimes I wonder if the Latter-day Saints have read the books.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
For
okay,
real.
this happens. You think we're, for us with our Prozac and our pornography and our fast food and our depression and our broken families, well, now we're going to be the ones
We're
who
enlightened,
can correct.
yeah.
No.
Yeah,
ain't
we're
no
the
way.
ones that fix the problem, man. Yeah, we're going to do it right,
The
you know?
one thing that we have going for us is that we have these records of everyone else messing up to try to compare ourselves in there and catch
so much
ourselves
better
in our
now.
mistakes.
Okay, well, look,
Right?
I'm going to end this thing right now, and I'm just going to tell you, look, we can either do it that way through personal responsibility and Kwaku's interpretation of spirituality and so on and so forth, or we can just simply blame it on this guy who kind of looks like Karl Marx anyway. And I just say we blame it all on him, move on with our lives, and then act as though nothing happened. And whenever anybody asks us, we say, look, kind of look like Karl Marx. And then we kill two birds with one stone because Benson said they were all commies anyway. So, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's all Zebedee Coltrane's
Easy.
fault.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I guess
cool.
we're all in agreement. It's all Zebedee
Let's do
Coltrane.
it.
in the end?
He
Yeah,
could take
Zebedee
some.
Coltrane.
You could take some.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's funny. Okay, this is Midnight Mormons. See you guys in the next program. That was funny.
Killer research, dude.
Well, it's the fact. Here's the thing. Here's the problem I have is I just feel like it was Zebedee's thing that made people believe that, oh, that's how we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Instead of, okay, fine. Instead of people, I don't like that people who don't, even people in our faith, think that it's the way we've always been is racist. Like,
Yeah.
we're black. We were past everybody else with inclusion. Like we were doing things that were getting Mormons killed on
Actually,
behalf
it's
of black
true.
people.
I'll just add this to the end because I'm technically still recording now. I hadn't shut it off.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the number one things I say too. Is like people understand Joseph Smith was super avant-garde. Like he was, let's give the priesthood to anybody. And when he was saying like, dude, let's purchase their freedom and give them their freedom and give them their own state. Like nowadays people say, what, segregation? Like, no, that was literally like, we're going to make a Garden of Eden for them. Yeah. Like, just like we're making a Garden of Eden for ourselves in Nauvoo. Like that was so beyond his time. There's no way you could not look at the early black members of the church and not see absolute forward thinkingness. And I always say, like, the Mormon church is either 20 years ahead of its time or 20 years behind its time. You know what I'm saying? Like we're never right there with everybody else. We're either super spiritual, doing our things, a peculiar people, and on top of it, or we're sinning. We're at the bottom of the trough of the applied cycle, and we're committing errors that general society has gotten past 20 years ago. Like right now, our general error is that we're all a bunch of boomers. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, I had to do it. But anyway, yeah, I think the early Mormon church really shows that we're either 100 years ahead of our time or 100 years behind our time. And with Joseph Smith, we were 100 years ahead of it. After like the fourth or fifth president of the church, we kind of drifted behind, at least in this race in the priesthood.
And the thing is we should do what we've always done, which is tell the hard stories, tell the hard truths. Like we've always done that as Christians. We talk about when we look at Nephi and what he did to the king and cutting his head off. Like my 8-year-old boy learned about that. If you can teach that to an 8-year-old boy, then we can talk about priesthood.
Yeah.
And
tough stories like who? Like
True.
Green Flake.
Yes.
Oh,
Where
and a
can they
movie
watch the
getting
movie?
made about him by who?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
And-
This guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So
where can they go see
okay,
the
yeah.
movie?
So you can see the movie. Deseret Bookstores. So Deseret Bookstores, it's on DVD.
Awesome.
That's how I say you should get it.
Well,
I'm not
so
gonna
is
say
Papa
the rest of it.
Osler's book there, and so let's not use them. A different distributor. Who do you got? No, I'm totally just kidding.
Have
Actually,
them sell something good.
I don't even want to start beef with Papa
Dude,
Osler. I just know that.
I'm not really an actor. I was in one crappy movie once, but can I play Elijah Abel? Can you imagine though how that movie would get so much attention as soon as the Exmos find out I'm playing Elijah Abel, they will freak out.
So
that will
mad.
Yeah,
be
do you want a bunch of hate watchers, Mauli?
I want them all.
Yeah.
Change hearts.
That's
dude.
either very capitalist of you or very godly.
I
I
or
don't know which
both.
one
I
that
kind of
is.
look like him a little bit, don't I? I mean, no, not really, but just give me the little silly hair.
We'll talk. We'll
How
talk.
fun
We'll
that would
talk.
be. Can I give him a jersey accent?
Now we're done.
Yo, my name's Elijah Abel. What are you gonna do about it? It's the worst. It's the worst movie I've ever
You
seen.
just made him an
was he the one who was
Italian
a
Brooklyn
barber?
gangster.
No,
Okay,
Barber
we're done.
was Kwaku.
Oh, it's Quick
Yeah.
Walker Lewis. Yeah.
All right, we're done. That's
Play
it.
your namesake, dude.
Boom.
Yeah.